Hey everybody, welcome back to Terminus, the Jack 3D of extreme metal podcasts. I am the death metal guy, aka Amon Amarth t-shirt reading, never underestimate a forklift driver born in November.
I don't know what that's a reference to, but I think that's probably true.
No, the Facebook auto-generated tough guy t-shirts with all sorts of mixes of occupations and birthdays and shit like that. Very, very appropriate for the modern Amon Amarth fan.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, the modern Amon Amarth fan might have those shirts that say like Berserker Special Forces.
They definitely have the old my god wields a hammer, your god was nailed on a cross, any questions, that were really popular in the 2000s.
To be fair, man, I liked that one. It's
you don't understand. He did it for all of us, black metal guy.
He's living he's I'm just glad Amon Amarth are living their dreams, man. The last picture I saw of what's his name, Johan Hegg, he was just like hitting a giant animatronic serpent in the mouth with a hammer.
He is living his best life, I would say.
Exactly. I just want him to be happy, like Danny Filth. Anyway, Amon Amarth has done enough for us.
That is fair.
Anyway,
who are you? I
am the black metal guy, aka Herpes Transmission Speedrun.
I did play a 3-day fest at my local, and I deliberately didn't take a shit at the venue to avoid exactly that.
Yeah, I think it's probably a name for like a white belt screamo grind band.
Yeah, you would think it's a gore grind band, but it's actually some white belt stuff, or it's
actually a little cuter than that, because they're actually trying to give people herpes.
Or it's one of those Ohio mincecore bands that's getting popular now and shit.
You're giving them herpes, but it's feminist.
Yeah, exactly. It's a gore grind without any of the problematic aspects.
Strictly equal opportunity herpes giving, right? Sort of like gender neutral herpes distribution.
You dump it into the water supply. You can't control where it flows from there. It's not even a crime if you think about it. Oh god. Have you guys missed us? Have you missed us?
Yeah, so we continue. You are in the dark age of Terminus. This is well,
we're kind of exiting the Kali Yuga now. Things are starting to settle down for both of us, and we're kind of getting it back together.
However, it has been well over a week since our last episode.
Has it? Damn.
I think so. There's too much shit. But there's too much shit. So at this point, I'm giving no guarantees.
2022 is just kind of catch as catch can.
We're just trying to survive. Yeah. No. I mean, both of us obviously are doing what we have a bunch of good shows planned, and we want to knock them out as soon as we can, like seeding the water supply with herpes.
Knock out those warts as soon as we can.
Yeah.
I've always liked the idea that nowadays genital herpes is so widespread that doctors don't even tell you if you have it. That's interesting. That you can just have a fucking STD and nobody will tell you because they've just concluded that humanity has herpes now.
They've concluded. Yeah, they're like, oh, don't let the poor guy know.
Yeah, it's like the psychological.
It's just weird because there are probably a lot of ladies out there who would like to know.
I don't believe I have herpes, but maybe it's something I need to look into. If I can find a doctor honest enough to tell me.
Well, there are actually medicine men for that.
Oh yeah, you have to go into the deep woods and have a shaman consult the entrails of a frog to tell you if you have herpes.
He spreads the entrails of a frog on your genitals and looks at their distribution.
God. Usually I have to pay for that kind of service, but
well, I mean,
okay, so we got an interesting show of a couple records that are kind of directly comparable in a lot of ways, but real quick, got to do the housekeeping. Follow me, the Death Metal Guy, on Facebook at Terminus Podcast, or the Black Metal Guy on Instagram at Terminus Extreme Metal. And then, if you want to get us back in the saddle, please allow us to quit our real jobs by giving us money via Patreon.
yeah. Now that we've inspired your confidence in our continued production of content,
let us strong arm you into to enabling this stupid fucking task that we've set out for ourselves to have the last word on extreme metal. If you follow us on Patreon, $3 and up gets you access to the Terminus Prime bonus episodes, and $5 and up gets you access to the Terminus Black Circle, our private Discord server that has been primarily obscure Pepe memes and discussion of stand-up comedy over the past week or so. So with that being said,
like memes involving Pepe and breasts.
Yes. Lots of Pepe reaching toward powerful milkers in a sort of shamanic manner. You know, it's like poetry. It rhymes.
It's an act of devotion.
Yeah, exactly. We're worshiping the feminine eternal in a way. We're like Narbaleth, like that. So with that, Black Metal Guy, let's talk about the long-anticipated album that you are bringing on.
Hail! This is Brandon from Cromlech, and you're listening to Terminus.
Ares Kingdom have been anticipating the collapse of modernity since their inception with Return to Dust, and now we are in darkness at last, which is the title of their album. It is out on Nuclear War now.
Shockingly.
Shocking. This is a band you've heard me spurg out a lot about over the years, right? Mm-hmm. Especially on this show. I mean, I feel like they've been one of our reference points for the kind of war metal that is basically just, in many respects, as you've said it about this record, and you coined the term, really, when talking about Absus Tara, but just black metal built with thrash parts.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you're not going to hear anything that sounds stereotypically war metal in the blasphemy Diocletian vein on this, right? But, and what we could even call it is who knows. But, I think really, like, I quite liked their last record, By the Light of Their Destruction, and then I worked backwards to Return to Dust, which I think I only found not this past spring, but like last spring. I really only checked that out, and I was like, holy shit, this is one of the best records I've ever heard. And it's just been on constant rotation for me since then. I've been stoked about this one, and it sort of crept up on us because I think, Terminus Dark Days it is, and I was, I was out questing. And I think it was a fan who told us, or our intern, who was like, oh yeah, there's a new Ares Kingdom record. I was like, what the fuck?
And if you're missing an Ares Kingdom record, clearly you're psychologically occupied elsewhere.
Exactly. Well, they also were really low-key about the release. Like, I think it was on YouTube before it was on Bandcamp, and the thing on YouTube was like, it's like an obscure channel. So yeah, it is out. And it is sort of a continuation of the vibe on their last one, By the Light of Their Destruction, in that this is By the Light of Their Destruction sort of stepped back from the sort of epic, highly composed form of their older stuff, and was more just very stripped down, couple riff thrash songs of extreme density. Very fast stuff and slow stuff that was just intensely filled in with like just, 16th note, just like downbeat 16th note double bass stuff. 2 or 3 riff songs that bulldoze by between, like at around the 4-minute mark. But that still have these things that are their hallmarks, such as like long deliberate builds. that involve a lot of rolling percussion. And that record saw them, doing sort of pure body music in a way that I think is them at their best. And they don't always do that. Incendiary is a record where they're playing with more like ambitious, kind of like proggy might be the wrong word, but structurally proggy, kind of heavy metal-y stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah. To let everyone know kind of where we're coming at this from, you've listened to the whole discography, and I've heard probably 2 Ares Kingdom songs 10 years ago before listening to this new album. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So maybe, okay, so this new album sort of continues in that vein, but it's a little bit different. By the Light of Their Destruction is very, has a sort of discharge-like focus and condensation to it. This is more sort of, these songs are more like adventurous and episodic in certain ways. Like they're like By the Light is deliberately just force of necessity through the whole thing. And this seems to be much more sort of open-ended, kind of jammy ways of composing songs. So I guess before we get to your take on this, should I also remind people who Ares Kingdom are? Do they know?
I mean, I think they're part of an obscure enough niche that, it'd probably be worth telling people. Okay, so
these are... or 2 out of 3 of them are former members of Order from Chaos, right? The Order from Chaos guys are Mike Miller and Chuck Keller, who were in Order from Chaos with the guy from Angel Corpse, whose name I'm of course now going to be forgetting as soon as I try to remember it. It's like fucking You know, Pete Helmkamp.
Yeah.
God, who would ever think I would have tripped over that? But yeah. So they were in this band called Order from Chaos that is, like I think I checked it out like when I was very young and was like, well, this is too noisy for me, or like I cannot hear the riffs. And I checked it out again today finally, and I was like, I cannot hear the riffs.
It's very amazing. It's pretty like in the Conqueror vein, really.
Yeah, but like with way more percussion. It's like really like grindcore. Mm-hmm. And it's got a much heavier low end sound, and it's just Conqueror's art is this kind of like scrapey noise stuff, right? This is you get like roll. It almost sounds like Prophecy of Doom or some of the like heavy crust grind, but with like certainly like black or early Death and Black and thrash stuff going on in it too. Mm-hmm. It's some like missing link between Slaughter Lord and like Assuk or something.
Yeah, I can see that.
It sounds like a ton of bricks going very fast with punctuated rhythms. It's also a lot like Concrete Winds, as that would suggest. Mm-hmm. Like now that I heard it today, I'm like, oh, Concrete Winds is sounding like this. And Order from Chaos is a band that will come up again in this show because I think it was probably a big influence on the Sacramentary Abolishment and Axis of Advance guys.
Yeah. It's part of the same sort of like abstract pseudo circle. Yeah.
Yes. So Ares Kingdom exists as in parallel to those bands, right? And especially Axis of Advance. But yeah. Oh yeah, and I should mention, third member is Alex Bloom, who's done vocals since 2001 and now also does, co-vocals and now also does bass.
And he's probably better known for Perdition Temple these days.
Is that one of the sort of like, that's like a... Does that have that's like a war metal band, right?
I've seen them. They're pretty popular down here in Florida. They're sort of a halfway point between Angel Corpse and sort of like Paul Ledney, like Prophanotic and Demon Sea stuff.
Yeah, it is 2 members. It is Gene Palabicki and Ron Palmer. It's two Angel Corpse people who've played in Angel Corpse.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Nice. Not like a favorite of mine, but I can listen to it and enjoy it.
That's like Hell's Headbanger standard. Anyway, so that's the background on Ares Kingdom. So they've gone from sort of primordial extreme metal to this sort of martial heroic thrash. And this style of stuff, right? I mean, when we reviewed Terra by Absu, right, was not your favorite. You generally don't really like anything that draws too directly on thrash. However, what do you make of this one?
I ended up enjoying this a lot more than I expected to. You talk a lot about this sort of like this sort of tag of arrogant thrash, and I mean that's kind of a sprawling thing. You can apply that to a lot of things, but what I always associate that with is stuff where you're doing these sort of like speedy, like almost overly articulated thrash meets death and black metal riffs, and like it's sort of like I always imagine it as a, sort of riff salady in a way that doesn't really appeal to me.
So you're thinking about like Argosland or something, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of Argosland.
Early Stargazer.
I'm thinking of Absu. I'm thinking of early Stargazer, stuff like that. This, I get how this relates to that whole idea, but the presentation of it is like completely fucking different. Because, and like I said, I'm not a guy that's familiar with the Ares Kingdom catalog, apart from hearing a couple songs back in the day and not being that into it, at least when I first heard them. But what strikes me about this is that Ares Kingdom gets categorized as like a death thrash band, which is like accurate on a nuts and bolts level. But at the same time, this, like In Darkness at Last, just is a black metal album. Does that make sense? Like...
Yeah,
it's like distinctly, it is executed in the manner of a black metal album. So
another one of my best buds has said that about Return to Dust, and I think it's true of that too. Like I think it is not only does it have a generally black metal mood, it really does a lot of specifically black metal things on a songwriting level, even though almost every riff you can say this is a thrash riff, that's a thrash riff. There's no death metal here. I mean, except insofar as like late 80s extreme thrash was turning into death metal.
Yes. So I really like the whole vibe of this is really interesting because it's using like piece by piece. These are like pretty simple riffs and arrangements, but they're arranged in this very ornate, sort of complex way structurally. But that being said, most of these are fundamentally like two riff songs. And a lot of these songs are structured around an elaborate process of getting from first big riff to other big riff. And it's a very interesting structural conceit. I can't think of anything that like works just like this music does.
It's like they took the formula of By the Light of Their Destruction and threw in it took that, like, say, okay, we're going to have songs centered on 2 or 3 riffs max, maybe 2 riffs. And then they built in all of this interstitial material on this record. But it still has the kind of raw, shoot from the hip approach of the last one.
I definitely agree with what you said early on, that these definitely sound like songs that were kind of jammed on, like in a practice space. Just because the way... I think I know, because I know that you, especially with more familiarity with the catalog, have more criticisms of this record than I do. I think that I, in this circumstance at least, really like the kind of diffuse wandering quality of these songs, just because it's such a strange juxtaposition against the sort of nuts and bolts material on display. It gives it a really unique vibe, and what I always end up comparing it to mentally isn't other arrogant thrash or something. I'm thinking of like old Graveland. I'm thinking of sort of janky early black metal. I don't know. It's really neat, and I think I'm going to come back to this one a lot.
Well, I think Graveland is definitely a good comparison for Ares Kingdom in general, but I would say the things I like best about Graveland and Ares Kingdom are sort of intense focus and directedness. I think Following the Voice of Blood, the one we reviewed for this show, right? That one is kind of episodic and wandering in a weird way. And I really like that record, but I think that kind of is a fair... Like, structurally, it's definitely weird in a way that I could see being related to this.
Yeah. I think, I mean, that's pretty solid. Or even the stuff that I've heard off, like, Thousand Swords kind of gives me this vibe. You definitely get the sense that these are, like, epic songs, but they're epic songs about, like, not even an empire in decline, but an empire that has already declined. You know, it's like it's like music for the Barrack Caesars era, like during the fall of Rome. You know what I mean?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I think as a comparative basis, we should like listen to some of the early stuff and think. Let's just go to like one of the calling card songs, "Dream of Armageddon" from Return to Dust.
Okay, I get the entire thing now. I get exactly the difference between our opinions. I got it. Like, immediately. You could have played 30 seconds of it. I would have understood
it. Well, I think it was important for you and for listeners to hear the,
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. It's a huge difference from this material.
Yeah, so how would you describe that difference?
Well, I mean, you wrote something in the notes, and I read it, but even without reading, I would have picked it up. The hardcore vibe. And like you wrote, Cro-Mag's Age of Quarrel, sort of like apocalyptic, processional hardcore. You know, that era where the hardcore bands would do the big 5-minute song where there's, you know, like the 2 minutes of intro before the song kicks in. And it's there to sort of indicate the significance of, you know, sort of the defeat of humanity. I get it, yeah.
The sense of groove is like extremely Cro-Mag's. I mean, the other would be Best Wishes, which basically that's Harley's like, that's after John Joseph left the band. It's just Harley being a psycho, and it's arguably better. It's like, it's got a ton of, it's like a late 80s hardcore record made from purely the ingredients of proto-extreme music. Like, it's fascinating. But, like, there's riffs on Best Wishes that, like, could be Ares Kingdom riffs or Impaled Nazarene riffs. So it has this sort of, it has the Kali Yuga warrior hardcore.
It also feels like Integrity. In a way.
Yeah, Integrity comes right out of that. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, the sense of just groove and like sort of the sort of Teutonic funk in the cymbals, right? The sort of cymbal the cymbals and the drumming, the backbeat stuff coordinated with the chug there in a lot of those riffs is just really Cro-Mag's. And just the idea that like they do this sort of like they do intros. It's like the only band that I would ever be cool with doing like 4 nested intro riffs. You know what I mean? Like a lot of those riffs introduce like that sort of the big arcing, a lot of the big arcing leads come back later in the song in different forms, but like they run through those all because each of them is mosh building to the next. They're doing this sort of like massive like metal architectonic that's built with like hardcore mechanics. Just like each riff drives to the next, releases into the next. There are clearly riffs where you're just supposed to be hammer fisting. And like they do all that build, and then the vocals drop in over a 2-step. And then it, you know, and then you get this sort of another one of those giant glorious riffs. And then it just rolls out over the double bass and then back to a 2-step. It's just like, it is not structured like, every riff is a thrash riff, but it is not structured like thrash metal. It's structured like black metal and hardcore at the same time. Yeah, I get what you mean. And the other big important quality that you could hear, especially in the first is they use these sort of timbre variations within thrash riffs. So they do you can do this sort of like arcing lead of the kind that we might hear with the arrogant thrash thing. Then just like hit these enormous chords, and they're doing their equivalent of black metal chording, where you're using these like, say, using like modified power chords, or like, whatever you want to call them, dyads or triads and shit, and especially like inverted power chords, and yet making them sound massive, giving them this kind of density that you just don't get with BM Trem, and then it locks back into the chug. Right. The other thing it feels like, because it feels like black metal and works like hardcore, is Amoebics. Like a much more technically accomplished version of Amoebics, right? But like sort of almost, a strange way that you could take Monolith or something. But yeah, so there's this integration, delivery of black metal, the kind of harmonic ideas you get in second wave stuff, and even more the early pagan stuff like Graveland, but delivered in this just brawny thrashing hardcore kind of package. And with the, I was telling you before the segment about the guitar tone. You hear the tone?
Yeah, that's like the paradigm of guitar tones you like.
Yeah, it's like it's like a raw but very concentrated, dense tone, and it sounds like driving a tank through a wall.
Yeah, just you're standing literally in front of the amp.
Yeah, exactly. So that's like, you know, that's where they're coming from, and there's a lot of that still here, but there are a lot of significant differences, and they do every record differently, right? These guys are like, you know, God, the other crazy thing to say at the beginning is like these guys are the same age as all of the founding second wave people, and the second wave guys who are like maybe on the older side, and almost all of those people are now irrelevant, or at the very best doing kind of preservation hall versions of their own music. These guys are a completely vital underground band, and they have just never stopped. It's like that review we did of Black Death, right? Yeah, it's like Black Death just like never got the memo that they were supposed to like huff their own farts. So with that, let's get directly to music. Fine.
Okay, yeah, so let's just immediately start doing the compare and contrast. I want to go to Under Algol. Right at the beginning, we're going to listen to like the first half of this song, and we disagree pretty intensely about some aspects of this, so let's just get right into it. So, the longer we've done the show, the more, you know, we've sort of, like, fine-tuned, like, distinctions in what you and I look for in music. Because we tend to agree on, like, 85% of shit. And then, like, sussing out the last 15% has been really interesting. And we're, like, slowly starting to close the gap, like, figuring out the sort of, like, meta-narrative behind what we're into. One thing that I think is a crucial difference is you really prioritize things feeling powerful in heavy metal.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, which is like an obviously sort of an inherent part of the genre. I think that I have a certain I've got a certain penchant for sort of like more certain kinds of negative emotion that you are not as into, because there's something about this record where it is powerful in a sense, but it also sounds like exhausted in a way. Like this is a defeated empire, and we're kind of like wandering through the remains of it. And you've got this like echo of past glories and everything, but it's like ultimately this is the sound of like barbarians have already ransacked the fucking capital, you know.
But by the end of Rome, they'd already ransacked it like an embarrassing number.
Yeah, like 8 times. Yeah, the sacking of Rome is like in the double digits.
Yeah, which one?
We're literally not even talking about like the big primary one, you know, with the Goths coming in. This is more like, oh fuck, this is like the 6th time this year, you know. And I think, part of it's like my headspace right now. I've been going through some personal stuff, but I've been really attracted to this sort of like exhausted sounding music lately. And it's just such a unique mood. And like, I think a great example is that main riff here, which has the structural conceit of a sort of traditional, powerful death thrash riff, but it's formatted so weird. Like the starting chord is so high and at such a weird interval compared to its like lower turnaround at the end. It has this lopsided feel to it. That kind of reminds me of Grave.
Yeah, it's like starting on the 5th or something.
Yeah, it's starting in a very strange place. It doesn't really loop into itself very neatly. The playing on this record is interesting. It's like the guitars are always like heaving like a 16th note behind the drums. It's very behind the beat playing. So you get this sense of like sort of defeated empire and like impossible weight of just surviving in it. I think it's really cool. And structurally, this is a song that is almost entirely based off of that one riff. Yes, there are other riffs, but the other riffs in a lot of these songs are purely functional. They are there to create space and generate tension and to eventually loop back to the starting point. And the starting point isn't even what you would call like a super powerful, like ripping riff. It is just this sort of like endless loop of like futility and history. I don't know, maybe I'm getting too meta, but I really appreciate the whole vibe of this record.
Yeah, so let's see. So the thing about that riff is I do think it's a good, like, I like the riff. And it's like an interesting, it does sound a lot like a Graveland riff. It does kind of sound on a note by note level. It kind of works like one of the heavier gallop beats on Thousand Swords or something, you know, right? You just have to change it from like downbeat 4/4 thrash beat to like, you know, that the sort of the G beat. Right, the cat. Something like that. But like Graveland could basically almost play that riff. It's cool. However, like to me, it seems like it's a response riff rather than a call riff. And right, it's like
I totally riff. Agree. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Got it. Yeah, it's like you've just said something. You've just played like the riff, and then you just do this kind of like cool sort of like wind up. Right, there are all these like different kinds of gallop things on Thousand Swords, and this sounds like one of the wind up ones. It's like a pre-mosh riff almost.
Yeah, I specifically like the fact that the riff
or in a thrash context, or even on a Thousand Swords context, it's like winding up to a blast also.
Yeah, I like the fact that it's missing its partner riff, you know? I like the fact that it labors in isolation, you know?
if you're... Yeah, I guess if you read it... you may be reading this record on a more kind of like figurative level than me, or narrative level than me, and maybe that does make a kind of sense. I take your point that it fits with the certainly fits with the general theme of the record and the cover art and whatnot. Yeah, like a sense that the riff is literally belated, like it's the second riff.
Yeah.
Like you start the song on the second or third riff. I get that. I like the texturing in it, too. It's a good example of how AK do kind of, do thrashy stuff that has black metal drone textures in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a big component of this record is a sort of hypnotic drone to it.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I think you could hear that in a different way, maybe a less obvious way on the Return to Dust sample, too, except the drone is just like you're using the thrash pedal point to do it. They've always been sort of hypnotic repetition driven and never been afraid of playing the same note over and over again, which is great because that's the point of extreme metal.
Is to find the cool note and to play it a lot. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But yes, this record really brings out the drone, and there is a lot more texture and sort of breathing room in the guitar sound. By the Light of Their Destruction had a more murky sound than Return to Dust, but it also sounded like a ton of bricks. Right?
Yeah.
It sounded like a bunch of very murky bricks moving very fast. And this is this tone is more spread out and textural and sounds more like a black metal tone.
Yeah. And speaking of black metal, just because we're gonna run so fucking long on this thing, I want to get to another sample because you believe this record really picks up kind of in the back half.
Yeah,
which is interesting because I actually prefer the first half. This is interesting. We got like complete reversal of expectations covering this record. But I want to go to the one where you start to say that this is where the record picks up for you, which is a song called Equinoctium. And here is where the black metal is going to come out in a really obvious way. Like some of these riffs you're going to hear are going to have shades of like Impaled Nazarene, Immortal, like very early Amon Amarth, which is like sort of qualifies as black metal in a sense, and Graveland also. And here's where you can also see how this really slots into the Order from Chaos and then Sacramentary Axis, that whole like squad of bands. So we're going to listen to, again, like the first half of this song that functions basically as an entire build-up to a set of sort of Graveland variations that the song pivots off of and continues into the second half. So yeah, this is one of those records. This is such a fucking like weirdly meta kind of metal record, and such a wildly experimental one for how straightforward most of it seems. Because this is a song where the first like minute and a half like almost doesn't matter. Like those are deliberately like stock reduced to the bone sort of Celtic Frost style riffs.
But
like
they're really good.
No, they're good, but they're like remorselessly functional. Like none of them are supposed to be big riffs. But they understand that it's like, we need something there to prep that giant. So really, it's more of an immortal riff in the middle. It's like a late immortal riff, which is the turning point of the whole song. Like musically, this is structured in a way where I think nowadays, some metal bands kind of fuck themselves up structurally because they're concerned with every riff being a huge riff. Whereas the idea of these sort of functional, fundamental riff shapes that serve a structural purpose, the things that you would kind of call gestural riffs a lot of times, were kind of essential, to how things are structured. And I like that every riff is not supposed to be equal on this record. I like that there's clear importance placed on certain moments, It trusts you as a listener to understand it.
Well, I feel like the riffs at the beginning of the song are really important. Like, one thing that has always made this band great is that they're like, I don't know, I call them attack riffs. Like the sort of like basic, the sort of song, the riffs at the beginning of the song that deliver that sort of are stripped down and aggressive and simple. Like, I don't hear those as did you mean gestural in like the sense that I use it to criticize something, where it's like the empty outline of a riff? Because that's not how I hear these.
No, but maybe gestural is the wrong way, but it's like a riff that is primarily functional.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree about that. Yeah, these are force delivery riffs. This is the riff as just a riff, which is the musical delivery of force. It's not like it doesn't have an additional sort of like melodic content to it. Yes. And they're really good as that. And, to me, like, just the moment where they go, blah, 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 I find that very memorable. I love that part. It's, in part because people don't do it now. But, like, it really gets, like, the basic, the basic attack riffs on all of their stuff are always really solid, even though it can be very difficult to distinguish them note by note from things you've heard a million times before. Like the last riff, the two-step riff on on A Dream of Armageddon, it's basically The Weight by Killing Joke, right? And basically a bunch of early Metallica songs, therefore, right? But the way they're delivering it with that just gruesome funk, and these like little just articulations and dips in it that change it completely. And they've always had a way of doing, I don't know, just really ballsy, physical 2 or 3 note riffs. And I think like this track is a really good example of that. Or like, how do you play a song, right? I was saying when we were listening to it, right, that a lot of the early stuff sounds like Into the Crypt of Rays or something, right? But how do you play something that sounds like it without actually sounding like it, right? Because if you make something that really sounds like that track, it's going to sound sort of... That track is great because they're doing it for the first time, right? But if someone directly copies it, it's like, that's weird and anachronistic, like rock and roll-y shit. Like, why are they doing like a 1/4? Why are they doing like a major key there? Right?
Yeah.
Right? Like in Crypt of Rays, it really sounds like Ramalama stuff, right? And here it does not sound like that at all. It's just the super brutal stuff in it. It's like there's a way that those kind of Celtic Frost major key riffs go to Cryptopsy.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And this is like much more that kind of dissonance. Anyway, yeah, so yeah, I mean, yeah, can't complain about this one. That one fucking rips. Here's one. We're going to the second half now, and I like the start of the... Yeah, so I guess it starts... Yeah, Equinoctium is one before the second half. The track after that, Basilisk Flame, I like a lot. That's just an entire track of attack riffs. You like that one?
No, this is where we get into the material that doesn't interest me as much, because I think it gets closer to the stuff that you're interested in. I think just the things that we're interested in this very specific context are actually radically different.
Oh, it's because you don't actually like stuff that sounds like this, so you want stuff that sounds like the wonky experimental version of
exactly. It's like I don't like thrash as a rule, so I like it when they're doing thrash but very wrong. You know?
Okay. So I think I see what you mean. Yeah. So Basilisk Flame is basically like hyper amoebics or something. Then we get to Rapacious. I'm curious to think what you think of this one, because this has something in common with things that you like, but you might like the part that I don't like.
Let's see.
So there's so on the second half of the record, the songs open out a bit more, and so that means that on the one hand, they move more towards the epic scope of earlier records. On the other hand, it means that there's more room for the kind of sort of episodic approach to songwriting, right? And so this Rapacious really sounds like it could be broken up into two different songs, but I get that the point was how do you fit them together? Mm-hmm. Let's just start out with this riff, which I'm not so into, and this is the second rep of this riff.
Yeah, that doesn't do much for me either.
Yeah,
I just don't really like those intervals. It's not unique to this riff. That's just not like an interval I really enjoy.
Yeah,
it's like a third or something.
It's starting it's starting like a half step up and then just da 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 or something.
It's like bouncing between three half steps up and then all the way down.
It's the kind of to me it just kind of slews around, and I think it's like they've made great riffs with those same three notes before. But that particular way of doing them in this sort of like loose, grooving kind of way with the more textural chorded guitar.
It's Secret Agent Man in a way that I don't like.
See, I knew. Yes, I was going to say, isn't it Secret Agent Man? And you normally like the Secret Agent Man riffs, but yeah, this is kind of like a GBK riff, but without the things that give the GBK riffs the kind of like...
it's missing all that sort of guitar flash and like color.
Yeah, it's missing the sort of like the Western quality that's like driving fast in my car to go do something sinister.
Yeah.
Right? So that, but the riff they turn it around on the
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's classic. That's what I would go to this band for, and then they lock into this big strut, and then the song sort of just like struts through the midsection. And then we get to the end, and there's basically like a bonus song hidden back here, except the whole track is kind of trying to get us here.
Unto the grave, the blade falls, swift goes by. Come the bell to cry. Taste
Yeah, so there you get a melody that could be in like a Dvorak symphony or something. Mm-hmm. Right? You know, a lot of bands could start a riff, you know, dum, 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 but only Ares Kingdom would finish it in the way they did. Dum, 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 dum. There are much more like, usually if you start a riff like that, it can turn into sort of like a stocky folk riff or something.
Yeah.
Where you could easily do that. There are a bunch of sick riffs that you could start like that, and that just won't sound as much like an elemental simplification of classical music as that riff did, right? Mm-hmm. The other thing it has there is, you know, you get the sort of the slow build with a lot of, you know, double bass tom action, and a very deliberate pacing to it. So it's, and the other thing is the sort of, we've talked about this a lot this year, right? The idea that, like, a lost art is the coordination of vocals with guitar tracks. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you do get a lot in 80s thrash, for better and worse, right? For worse, insofar as a lot of those bands are, like, glorified rock or heavy metal bands. For better, in the sense that it can lead to a kind of completeness of songwriting that you just don't get anymore, right? And so one of this band's great strengths is always, like, their ability to write to the guitar line, mm-hmm. and vice versa. And here, the vocals are very deliberate, and there's, like, almost like he's singing them, because they're timed to the riff. And the effect is very, well, powerful. And I would contrast that with, like, say, a moment on Dragons of Ara, where, like, all the parts I love. Like, when we get to the main riff of the song, it's a pretty sick kind of classic. It's one of the, I feel like there's way less hardcore on this record, but it's a very sort of Ares Kingdom throwdown kind of riff, closest to that hardcore aspect. And the track, I think it's about constellations, but the track, you know, it's got dragons in it, so that's cool. But he just sort of yells the chorus over the riff, and they kind of, or yells the title of the song over the riff. You know what I mean? And that's a fine thing to do sometimes, right? Everyone's allowed to do that sometimes. But it's, it comes across as a stock gesture there, right? Whereas, like, I don't know, you know, like, you know, when they finally yell the title of, you know, Return to Dust, Return to Ashes, Return to Dust, they've, like, built up to that for an entire song.
Yeah.
It's, so, just, like, different, but, you know, it, to your point, it goes with the kind of garagey, jammy quality of this record, right? Why not just, you know,
yeah, you definitely get the sense that they're deliberately trying not to overcook these songs.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's deliberately stripped down, and let's go to A Wolf on the Fold. This one is just like, I guess as far as like a track that just all the way through does the things I love about this band, it would be Equinoctium would certainly be that, and this track also towards the end. And this is a rewrite of the Byron poem that seems to have sort of changed out certain stanzas to. This is a very, like, the lyric, what they've done with the lyrics here is like really classic 90s shit. It's almost like Danny Filth. Like, they've just taken the Byron poem and added in their own stanzas to make it like, you know, like, instead of like the righteous wrath of God, to make it just like glorifying the angel of plague or something. Mm-hmm. Right. So, you know, they've just like, you know, taken a big sort of biblical set piece poem and made it evil.
The time of reverse and rise, the hopes of a man.
So, obviously I had to get one crushing 6/8 chug section in there. But, yeah, other thing to point out, you get the coordinated vocals and riffing here again. You know, the Angel of Death spread his wings on the blast. And as he's doing that, they're doing this just like, sort of, basically ascending power chord riff that's basically like every primordial garage punk riff. It's just like dum da dum 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 dum. It's a great example of like the very beginning of this music coming back at the end.
All right, guys, we are back with a record I'm really excited to talk about. This is the return on the show of Galicia with their first record titled Precipice that is coming out very soon on Hessian Firm. I think we're like 2.5 weeks out, I think. Something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. October 21st.
It'll be out.
So we actually get the scoop on this. For the usual disclosure, obviously, Hessian Firm, very good friends of ours, and the drummer of Galicia is a patron of the podcast and has been following us for a long time. So, I always do that just to, clarify, it's the positivity of my opinions, blah, blah, blah. But also, I'll be kind of a dick and just be like, shocking, good musicians listen to our show. Who could imagine?
Well, such is the nature. I mean, I think such has, that's how the music journalism sausage has always been made. And what really sucks is when people lie about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's, I'm glad to see that over the years the show has kind of borne out more good music than bad, and I say that because I'm about to say that I think that this is probably going to be in my top 10 of the year. This is an extraordinarily good record. The previous EP that we covered, Serpentine Descension, last year was a very solid thing, but kind of rough around the edges, and there were elements of it that we weren't a huge fan of. Basically, all of that has been fixed for me on Precipice. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the previous review or Galicia in general, Galicia are a 3-piece coming out of the kind of greater Los Angeles area, and they play a style of sort of melodic Black Death that is very directly inspired by Sacramentary Abolishment and Axis of Advance, who are bands that we've talked about extensively on the show and who we both covered on a Terminus Prime bonus episode, I think last year or very early this year. So this is a style of music that's pretty obscure, but is starting to kind of gain traction over the past couple years, I think. I feel like more and more people are rediscovering those records and just how fucking incredible they are.
Well, I mean, I think Hessian Firm is sort of leading the way in that. Labels have... Hessian Firm has always came out the door with a defined sound, the kind of dark metal aesthetic, right? Beyond black or death metal, this kind of thing that distills the most patrician elements of both. And one sub-sound, I think that there's now a specialty, is just stuff in this Axis of Advance sacramentary vein, right? Because, my and I believe our average album of the year for 2019, right, was...
2020, yeah.
2020, sorry. The Vortex, man. We started in 2020. For 2020 was the Into Oblivion EP.
Yes,
right?
It was.
And so these are both sort of these are both Hessian firm bands, and they're taking the Axis of Advance influence in very different directions. There's no way where these bands are in no way like doubling each other. It just makes a lot of sense that they're on the same label.
Yeah, and I would say in terms of, at least speaking for myself, I think that this record by Galicia represents so far the most ultimate nexus of like Hessian firm style and my taste coming together in the same place. Mm-hmm. We've covered a lot of Hessian firm stuff, and I've pretty much unequivocally enjoyed all of it. But in terms of sort of the stated musical ideology, so to speak, of Hessian firm and what I'm personally into, this threads the needle exactly for me. So obviously we kind of have to talk about this in contrast to Into Oblivion, which is sort of like the most immediate comparison, especially because it's also on Hessian firm. These are both bands that are deeply in tune with the vibe of stuff like Sacramentary and Axis of Advance, but where Into Oblivion sort of leans into the most ornate and sort of like almost neoclassical qualities of stuff like Axis. Galicia really taps in. I mean, Galicia is almost more like Sacramentary abolishment.
Yes, Galicia really sounds like a... well, I think you said it in the notes. It's like Into Oblivion is trying to build some massive new edifice with materials that you can find on the Axis of Advance records. It doesn't have as much of a direct relationship to Sacramentary at all. Mm-hmm. And to the extent that it relates to other stuff, it's like to the most ornate Swedish Black Death or like Terminus or Graveland, sort of like black metal bands building at massive, with a kind of massive scope. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it might have more to do with like black metal. Even though the music is in many ways more sort of disciplined and architectonic, right? Into Oblivion is much less raw than this.
Yes.
Into Oblivion is sort of sort of like solid, clearly demarked, strange and elongated forms. This record taps into sort of the wild, punkish aspect of Sacramentary.
Yes. Into Oblivion is stately in a way that this isn't.
That's a good way to put it. Into Oblivion is very stately. Even when it's being very fast and aggressive, it is extremely stately. It's like a storm over the sea or something. This is sort of... This is quite technical music in many ways, and often extremely fast. However, it is also sort of... It has this sort of raw, garagey energy that you get on Sacramentary. And if someone told me that this was like a rehearsal recording from between Sac-Eb and like AOA, I'd probably believe them for a minute.
Yeah, I could definitely see that.
Mm-hmm.
This definitely... I mean,
there's unique things about this that very much separate it, but like... I would do a double take.
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. And that's something I really enjoy, is the really scrappy quality of this. Like, it's highly technical, and it's very, like, very intelligently structured music, but it also kind of reminds me of, like, South American death metal styles, where it's just fucking wild and unhinged the whole time.
Oh, I hear that, actually. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because talking to the drummer, I don't know if he cares about us using his name, so I just won't. This is a guy who has like an established interest in stuff like brutal death metal. And you can kind of hear that bleed into this music structurally, because it has that kind of schizophrenic, like, mid-era Cryptopsy quality to it. And what's interesting is that it is so wild and unhinged, but it's also deeply, deeply melodic. Pretty much continuously. One of our complaints, probably our primary complaint about the previous...
Yeah, really our only like, isolatable complaint.
Yeah, about the previous EP was that there was a tendency to play around with these, like, extremely dissonant, more definitively kind of, like, dark and strenuous sections that were kind of cool in the abstract, but didn't feel... They just weren't matching the quality of the more melodic material. Here, they're still...
And at their worst, they sounded like Disso Black Skronk.
Yeah. Here, there are still those dissonant elements, but they're woven in so much better into the overall fabric of this music. So, the end result...
I think they're also played differently.
Yeah, they're definitely executed.
I think yeah, we talked before about how, like, it was important that those sections were in the songs. You actually defended that. You're just like, I just feel like they haven't developed these ideas far enough. And it's almost like you suggested that maybe those were placeholder riffs that just stayed in the song. Yeah. And here, they're still those parts, but they're not as much, like, isolated on their own. They're much more woven. They're much more like... functional sections within sequences of riffs rather than like all say stuffed at the beginning of the song. And they are instead of sounding like a little like orthodox stuff, they sound like Axis of Advance's kind of like beat to quarters riffs, right? You know, like you know, and there's a different way of generating dissonance on the guitar. It's more like this sort of like squealing, scraping kind of, you know, noise thrash stuff rather than these kind of squalling chords that we're very used to.
Yeah, and also another thing that's interesting to talk about in relation to because the overall effect of this, yes, very much like Axis of Advance, very much like Sacramentary, but it's also like one thing that the drummer has been interested in having us cover in like a Terminus Prime episode is the Lycathia of Flame and Appalling Spawn records. And once I heard this record, it's like Lycathia is like, okay, I can see, but that's a more distant relation. Appalling Spawn, the band before Lycathia Flame, makes absolutely perfect sense as like a fundamental part of the texture of this band. But with all that preamble out of the way, I think that you talked to Nick, so do you want to introduce the kind of premiere we have? It's unusual for us to cover a record so far in advance, so we've got something kind of neat here.
Yeah, well, we're beginning a new epoch. Even in the dark age of Terminus, a new epoch is forged deep in the forges below Mount Forge, and that new epoch involves doing premieres, and we've been approached by a few pretty cool bands to do it, and we'll tell you when. And then we talked with Nick about doing it for this record, and he graciously agreed to let us. So there's already the first track of this record, Solidifying an Epoch Under the Vapor Canopy, I believe, is already up on YouTube and sort of premiered as the single. But we're going to premiere a second one, which is track 4, which I think you and I might actually both agree is the best song.
Yeah, it's up there. Yeah. The whole block of songs, that whole 4... This is only a 6-track album, and the continuous block of, like, 4 songs in the middle is fucking insane. Like...
Yeah. So, Despondent Deity is the 4th track, sort of, you know, turning point of the record. And we are now going to play the whole thing for you the first time. right, so what do we have to talk about there? I would say the boom, da-dum, dum, da-dum, 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 dum, da-dum, da-dum, dum, dum, da-dum, da-dum, dum.
There's a lot to talk about. So something interesting about this is it's cool to play a whole song, because I wrote in the notes, like, sampling this music, like, borderline doesn't matter, because it's as though there was a concentrated effort for every single minute of this album to contain all the constituent ideas that the record is working with. Mm-hmm. like it is
like a fractal record.
Yeah, it's like the cover art itself, just this, like, highly detailed, inscrutable thing. Mm-hmm. It's so. But, so yeah, every song contains all the constituent parts. Every part of every song contains those constituent parts in a fractal formation. This is dizzyingly complex music on a structural level. It is totally unwilling, outside of very rare circumstances, to settle into anything for, like, a full 4 repetitions. But the melodic construction of this music is so refined, it's very easy to follow at the same time. You know, the lead guitar truly is the guiding voice of this music, and it provides the narrative bedrock of these songs while everything else just swirls around it. It's lovely.
Yeah,
I love the way this is made. You know?
They don't... They understand not to, like, although it's meant to be this highly varied, rapidly moving music, it's, they don't let the, they don't let that blue ball you, right? There's not, like, a deliberate refusal. There's not, like, say, a artificial refusal to repeat cool parts. They just they'll just extend a part by modifying it. Or on this song, right, you've got the well, they do the big, so there's this kind of, like, I think the thing that I find, like, the sort of like the highlight on this song, right, is that kind of just, like, slamming riff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. It's...
Right? Dum, 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 dum. Right? That is like a, does that land with the same kind of groove both times, or does it change on the second rep?
I think it changes when they come back to it.
Well, no. It's kind of this, no, it's kind of the same.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard to remember the sequences of things that happen in these songs.
The point is they don't iterate it. It's not like a chorus that's going to come back 2 to 4 times in a regular way, right? It's an event at the beginning of the song, and then it's an event at the end of the song. It also points to something that's big about Axis of Advanced songwriting, which is that you have this thing that is sort of it's the sort of big, brawny consonant riff of the track, but it is also a throwdown riff. It is also a mosh riff, which is the thing that connects it to Ares Kingdom. That riff could basically be an Ares Kingdom riff.
And it's also a thing that really connects it to Axis. Like, when we talked about Axis and Sacrament...
Oh, that's what I meant, Axis. Did I say something else?
You said Ares Kingdom.
Oh, no. Oh, even at first? I think I said... It's like... No, AOA for sure do that. It's like the epic riff is often the really physical one, and Ares Kingdom often does that. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah. We were talking about that when we covered the Sacramentary and AOA albums, like the idea that one of the crucial differentiating factors of those bands compared to most extreme metal bands is that they see absolutely no division between the high art and low art stuff. And they seem to take specific joy, as these guys do, in using these ornate melodies in just, like, thuggish rhythmic arrangements, which is so fucking cool and so rare to find, especially these days. I love that, and really, I love the energy and the kind of embarrassment of riches this album has, where it's like there's so much nervous energy to this music, where it's like they're so excited about every goddamn riff that they're playing everything too fast because they're so ready to get to the next one and show you this one too. It's like, on the last review, I was talking about how, like, I think a problem for a lot of bands is like that they treat like every riff like it should be the big riff. Here's a case where that actually works, because every riff kind of conceivably is the big riff. Which means that these are these huge, like, infectious melodies, and yet it's this very horizontal, ornate kind of songwriting, because, you know, everything is vying for attention simultaneously.
That's what you said about Axis of Advance, right? It's very like they don't set off the big moments in the same way.
No, but also
I feel like this band does set off the big moments in a big way. They like count things in, and
you've got an interesting take on what that influence might be.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's Oh yeah, like where some of that epic stuff is coming from. Yeah, well,
specifically where the more like immediate, sort of like physical, like crowd pleasing energy comes from. Because you suggested that a lot of this might just be coming from straight like American metalcore.
Yeah, not a lot of it, but like remember how on the last one there were these parts that were maybe kind of unexpected in this context, where you would just get something that really sounded like a Dark Tranquility riff or, Vinterland or something.
Yeah.
And they were, played within this context where it still sounded hard, right? And it was kind of unexpected and refreshing and well done. Like, very now, but not in a bad way, and that wasn't dominating the music. Well, on this record, they've sort of... We said we liked those parts, and on this record, they're still here, but it seems like some of them have been changed out for just literal metalcore riffs. And, like, in some sense, like, as you would say, they're the same picture, right? But,
yeah.
But there really are specific American inflections in how you play those riffs, and I think the best example of the samples we pulled is probably on your... honestly, if you want to get there, it's probably on Becoming Entropy. It's on your sample, your second sample. Because you were going to sample... You chose Despondent Deity as your sample, and so we just play that as the premiere. But but yeah, if you want to talk about the core stuff... do you want to just go to the Becoming Entropy? I don't think we have to do this in order.
Yeah, we can go to Becoming Entropy just to keep the thread going. So there's a few things I want to talk about on this sample. One is of the myriad of influences on this music, a really big one that might be hard to spot at first is just like trad metal. There's a ton of just like traditional heavy metal on this stuff. Which ties it into another project by two of the guys from this band, which is Warriors Chalice, which started as a really like ripping sort of like oi punk meets black metal thing, and then became more and more complex and became much more aligned with like heavy and power metal and goth rock, while still maintaining all the punk and the black metal in there. So now we get to see some of those influences creep into Galicia, because there's parts on this record where if you cut them out and just played them in isolation, they would be like unadorned 83 NWO-BHM, as you're going to hear on this track.
Back
what was that, like 60 fucking riffs or something are played there? Jesus Christ, man. Okay, so there were a couple things we wanted to talk about. So there was a part there, the one with the really, really cool, intricate bass work that struck me as very NWO BHM, but you also associated with American metalcore, and that definitely, I can see it when you say it like that. But then toward the end, that kind of like skronky but melodic, almost screamo-y thing, definitely, yeah, I see the American metalcore all over that.
Oh yeah, they're just like, so they're doing this like funky backbeat thing under it that makes it more choppy and screamo-y, but the riff is just straight up like, I mean, just like metalcore, like melodic metalcore, like it could be like Darkest Hour, like
yeah, it could be like a Parkway Drive riff or something. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Like the thing that makes it work here is that it's used as, well, there really isn't any filler on this record, but it's used as an interstitial riff. It's like a tension. It sort of releases out of the. It's almost like they're using it as a mosh part instead of like the hook highlight of the song, and it's just like this quick little spazzy break.
You can you can almost two-step to it, but the time signature is too weird.
You just kind of jump around. You know but like, you know, it's the kind of riff that maybe you know, like an early 2000s band might get to by like painstakingly imitating Slaughter of the Soul riffs until like they have this one really big riff, and then it's like the hook of the song and shit. And this band just like dashes it off right there, almost as a joke.
Yeah, there's like, these are like, you get the sense that these are very complicated songs that took a while to do, but individual parts were written very quickly, like just on the spot, you know.
Yeah, but I don't know, like I think the thing before it, like like there is a metalcore thing in there. It's kind of like the sort of like looping kind of heavy metal via America, like emo way of hearing heavy metal that you get in like A Pregnant Light.
Yeah, I definitely get what you mean there.
Like it's kind of an American, it's like, it is kind of new wave of British heavy metal, but like it's like how that was processed by punk kids in the early 2000s.
Yeah, it's what we're saying is that this,
like 3 Inches of Blood almost.
Yeah, dude. What we're saying is this is like a kitchen sink album that actually works. This
Which
is like
I guess is like 3 Inches of Blood.
Yeah, this is a record where all of everybody in the band's influences are present, and somehow they're making it fucking work.
Yeah. Like, what are you influenced by? Yes.
Just music. Fucking whatever.
Oh, God, yeah, which is, like, the most pretentious what separates these guys, right, is that, like, a pretentious band, right, if you ask them, like, what are you influenced by? They'll be like, you know, music, life, you know,
yeah.
Women, the Beatles. And if you ask these guys, they'd be like, well, give me a sec. And they'd come back to you with, like, an itemized 50-part list.
Yeah, and they're the kind of guys who aren't ashamed of that. They're like, oh, no.
Exactly.
This is definitely the With Fear I Kiss the Burning Darkness riff right here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because, they understand they're deliberately working with tools.
Yeah.
So... do you have anything more you want to say about that one?
No, man. Like I guess one thing that I want to say is like, sort of in a broader sense, there tends to be a criticism from a lot of people when it comes to music like this about how kind of spazzy it is and how much it jumps around and how it doesn't settle down. But like, as a guy who's really amenable to some stuff that a lot of people in metal don't like let's say like early Dillinger Escape Plan, it's like there's a place for that. We've got plenty of records out there that love settling into a groove. I think it's fucking cool to hear stuff that has such a distinct heavy metal pedigree filtered through the sort of structural conceits of like really advanced hardcore. I think it's fucking neat to listen to.
Yeah, there's a lot of change-ups in Axis of Advance, but there's way more here, like by like a factor of 2 or 3.
Well, it's almost as though they've basically compressed Axis songs into like half the running time that they would be from Axis.
Yeah, and like so, the sort of more deliberately rapid-fire approach is never going to be my favorite thing, right? I just like more repetition, but like there's nothing that's like spazzy about this. And the rapid change-ups, they're able to do rapid change-ups in ways that do not break momentum, and that's really important. And have, like, sections that one band might do as just one riff. There are, like, 4 riffs in it. So to wit, let's zoom in on some of that fractal detail now. So let's go to the forwarding, which is the third track. There's also the lyrics here are sort of dystopian sci-fi concept album, very much influenced by what Axis of Advance did, but quite different in inflection, and this is one of the peak action moments. So here we're going to get some, honestly, I'll talk about the genre stuff later. Let's talk about the songwriting. So one thing that they do that Axis of Advance also does is you could call like modular songwriting, right? The riffs get transformed over the course of the song. They get decomposed, reassembled, and like ideas that appeared as one, you'll get ideas reappearing there'll be musical ideas will be delivered with different melodic content, and the melodies will get swapped around into different parts, and it's easier to explain in detail. So let's get into it. Just listen for the different kinds of change-ups, especially follow the drum beats, and listen for every time a riff changes. So 41 seconds into the forwarding.
One thing I do want to bring up is the bass work across this record is fucking remarkable. It's really added to by the kind of dry production. It really pops out on its own, and it's constant counterpoint and constant reharmonization of the riffs. It's really adds a lot to the whole thing. As you could hear on that big doom passage in the end, it's wandering around, kind of exploring the space on its own. It really just adds a ton of color to this music.
This is the year of the free bass.
Yeah, the bass really has been freed from its shackles over the past couple years.
Yes. Yeah. When the Thimble Winter comes, the shackles of the bass will be broken and it will run free.
Well, it's like you said, metal is entering its a romantic decadent era now. Mm-hmm. Good if it gets a shit like that.
I think sometimes bass is used now to generate really heavy physical effect too. I mean, so it's doing a lot of different things, but certainly on this, having the the Sternatus record has huge bass on it.
Yeah.
Some of it very colorful like this, and some of it much more just almost sort of thrumming discharge bass. There's some other thing we were reviewing that I loved recently that I can't remember that had just really powerful bass on it. Bass is stepping up. So, and people are also producing their records in ways that leave more room for it. So let's talk about the sort of the nuts and bolts here about that kind of modular approach. So this starts off with thrash beat, evil thrash riff, right? And you get that that sort of the Slayer scream, right, which happens all over this record, which is we love.
Yeah, as an aside, the vocals on this record are fucking wild. There's it feels like there's 8 different styles of vocals used on it, and they're all very well executed, and they're all just hilariously intense and bizarre and deliberately obnoxious in a way metal vocals should be.
Yes, it is obnoxious and it's awesome. I mean, I think probably everyone does vocals on this record.
It sounds like it, yeah.
Although a lot of it is very deliberately written out. It's probably okay, you take these lines, you take these lines, you take these lines. Other parts are clearly just okay, yell.
Yeah, they're clearly just there's an ad-lib track where everyone's around the mic and they just scream and growl at random.
Which is awesome. It's totally over the top. It actively interferes with the impact of certain sections, but only in a good way. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just it's how things were used to work in the early 90s, where the fact that the screaming was really important to the music.
Yeah. Vocals meant something.
Yes, they were intended. And as you've pointed out, the vocals are sort of influenced by also gore grind technique and stuff, right?
Yeah, there's all kinds of shit going on.
But so you get this sort of stock evil thrash riff, which at this point I'm going to have a hard time even remembering, and then you get and then you get this sort of blast wall, right? Right, and that has the kind of one of the sort of epic AOA riffs, right? It's this kind of, that's one of the most second wavy feeling riffs on the record, but just because it has these dense chords that are being blasted. And that's the quote-unquote big riff as far as the fast stuff. 2 reps, that's it. The blast continues. It doesn't break momentum. And now we're on a 3-note evil black metal riff, right? Which is just dum, 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 dum. And then and then we're on another 3-note evil black metal riff. Dum, dum, or dum. It's 1 minor 6 7, 1 minor 6 7. It's I wrote it out. The point is you have each of those for 2 reps. So you have 2 reps of this longer, more chorded riff, more melodic one, and then the symmetrical amount of space is taken up by 2 reps of this really simple attack riff, 2 riffs of this really simple attack riff, and then you get the mid-tempo stomp with epic chords, and that's kind of that unique mid-song event, right? And although it's kind of recalls evil thrash riff, weirdly. Or wait, no, sorry, for the blast wall, the sort of more majestic blast riff, but not in any direct way. That repeats 4 times. It's your big climactic moment, and then thrash part restarts. This time with another one of those 3-note black metal riffs, but this time it sounds more epic. It's like 1 flat 7 octave, less like chromatic. Then you get another blast wall, and this has that like run, except it's like more complicated than that, right? And then finally, gigantic doom riff. So what you can hear there is like...
Also, all of this happens in 2 minutes. Actually, most of that before the doom part happens in like 1 minute.
Right. So you could hear like these ideas getting swapped around. They have a place for the thrash beat riff. And then there are these motifs that are developed. They're like, they do the big blast riff, and then the 2 follow-up riffs are like decomposed parts of it, kind of.
No, yeah.
And those are, and they have distinct moods to them, and those continue the evil, like, early second wave satanic thrash vibe of the first riff, they recall it, and then when our thrash part comes back, instead of having the slayery stuff, it's got the 3-note black metal stuff, but it has the epic mood of the mid-tempo stomp and that first majestic trem riff.
Yeah.
So it's just like, I mean, the last one's almost like a Spite Extreme, like a really simple Spite Extreme Wing riff.
Yeah, because these are like what AOA would do in a lot of their kind of like extended instrumental sections. These are riff clusters. Like none of these are designed to be perceived individually. Like the entire sequence of riffs across that extended blast beat section is a single unit. None of those individually have meaning. It's about the relationship between them that slowly progresses from this very dark place into this much brighter, more epic territory. It's so fucking sophisticated, and yet at the same time, it's the kind of thing you can only arrive at very organically by just jamming. You know?
Yeah.
It's like impossible to write on your own. You know?
Oh yeah, this is total full band music, and I really like that the recording is very full band.
It sounds like
we'll get back to that.
It sounds like it was recorded live.
Oh, for sure, which I love. Real quick, so like in terms of the influences there, the press release mentions in some sense, just the whole record really does sound like. I mean, we've been referring to the same 2 bands over and over again because there's very little on this that couldn't be on some weird missing link record between those. However, one thing that makes these guys so damn good at it is that they listen to the bands those bands were listening to. So the other bands on this influences list are like Blasphemy, right? Nothing here directly sounds like Blasphemy, but they're very clearly into the idea of sort of grinding extreme metal, right? You can hear that. Early at the Gates, right? The
Hessian firm staple.
The Hessian firm staple, yeah. I mean, it's, the Red in the Sky is Ours, right? That is, there's very little on here that you could say is directly from that record, but that's certainly what the Axis of Advance guys would have been listening to. Like, in terms of just like sort of aristocratic, blackish death metal and stuff. Emperor, right?
Yeah.
Again, one of the bands to imitate and try to beat at that game, right, in the early 90s. And Zyklon B, right, which is like early Scandinavian war metal.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. You could just as early war metal via Scandinavia, you could throw Nidden on there too, right? But like, these are, so they really understand the constellation that the bands they're influenced by are coming out of. And if you go through this little section, right, some of the more aggressive riffs, you really can be like, oh, there's the Emperor riff, right? There's the kind of, there's the Slayer riff. There's the kind of like, you can find certain parts of this record that sound more like angular kind of at the gates riffs. Anyway, so now the Doom riff. Right, this brings me to my last sample too. It's there's like that last riff, dum 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 dum. Right, I can still kind of hum it, even though it's been a minute, because even though the songs whiz by, those are some of the only sections they really rock out. And I feel like, so we've talked before, and I think you may have been the one who brought this up, that, Sacramentary Bashment is really, you can hear, directly influenced by Swedish Black Death. Axis of Advance, sort of less so. It's more digested, and two, it's like they're going back to some of the influences on those bands. Namely, say, English, a lot of the Swedish Black Death is like sped up English death doom. Right? Like Peaceful Death Doom, the more ornate Gothic Peaceful Death stuff. And the epic, the more noble, slow, stately parts on Axis of Advance often sound notably different from black metal because they sound more like, Gothic death and funeral doom.
Yeah, I've always been the big booster that Theragon is like a crucial part of Axis of Advance. Like it informs a tremendous amount of what's going on. Just much, much, much faster.
Yeah, and another band that we could place in this constellation that just fits in this constellation of bands is Solstice UK. Even though they are don't have screamy vocals, right? The sort of honorary extreme metal band. A lot of them, it seems like a lot of what these guys are doing is not just aping Axis of Advance riffs, they're like playing Doom riffs in the same way, and listening to things like Solstice UK, which are also a big reference point for both, certainly implicitly for Into Oblivion, and even more so for the brother band Cromlech. Right?
Yeah.
And also like a Hessian firm staple.
Yeah.
So the Doom parts on this are great and very authentic, and something I'd honestly like to hear more of. But, like Axis of Advance, the point is that you can also play those Doom riffs fast. So on Refract the Non-Submerged, we can hear that. This is the second track, and you'll hear the slow and the fast versions of the Doom thing. And also some more of that new wave of British heavy metal stuff that you like.
Oh, yeah.
I
Oh, dude, that fucking bass line at the end there.
Yep.
Oh, with all those little bluesy slide inflections in there. That's so sick.
So I really hear you on the Maiden thing there, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely like first 2 Maiden album type shit.
No. Like Maiden.
Oh, okay.
Like,
I mean, there's that too. I just always associate the super bass-driven stuff with like the early kind of scrappy shit.
No, it's like more so Rime of the Ancient Mariner and shit, like Power Slave album and stuff.
Yeah,
like,
that too, yeah.
There's really free bass happening there. And like, and the strut is like the strut in Power Slave. Mm-hmm. It's, on the one hand, it's, yeah, like, I mean, it's like the Maiden that's important for extreme metal, I think in a lot of ways, is I mean, for like early, like for the development of extreme metal, right? Those early kind of punky Maiden records are part of it, right? Mm-hmm. But like in terms of like the musical vocabulary of like noble riffing in like Swedish Black Death or Sacramentary or whatever, I feel like Peace of Mind and Power Slave are like really big.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah.
Because that's where you start to get that sort of like folky, very English sounding Dorian scale riffing. And I mean, there's some on Number of the Beast, I think, but like,
and then it becomes a primary thing. It becomes kind of the focus of the band later.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Much later work.
And to be fair, like some of it's there from the beginning, right? Transylvania has that.
Oh,
yeah, but like, so this has this kind of like, yeah, the counterpoint bass is like super Maiden. And really the chords almost could be too. But it also picks up on the Doom section. And the cool thing is that the big epic blast riff earlier in the song is a Doom riff, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about that. And you were saying underneath the drumming is so Jay Reed, right?
Yeah. Well, sorry, buddy. We barely talked about the drumming. There's just so much to fucking talk about. So the drumming's extraordinary on this record. Real quick, just like very bespoke kind of rhythms. Like lots of these like kind of scattered, like staggered blast patterns and these interesting like takes on like extreme metal takes on punk beats, like crazy elaborate D beat variations and stuff. It's fucking awesome. But yeah, he does that double snare thing.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's that section, which is like
maybe it's just before then. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a super Jay Reed thing to do. Although I will say he never does the Jay Reed fill, which is the only fill Jay Reed knows, which is
yeah. Well, but yeah, the funeral, you could like towards the beginning of the sample, you get the fast funeral doom riff, right? The staggered triplet blast, triplet half blast, that also has that Jay Reed feel, and that like a lot of Axis of Advanced drumming feels like a drummer like beating to quarters on a battleship or something, right? And like it's like military snare drumming, and the riff over it is like
very, very peaceful. Yeah,
it is. Yes, and that's a really cool thing because it allows you to, if you play riffs like that over blast, you can put an kind of inflection in the riffing that really is space. You can get spacing and bending and legato kind of stuff that's really impossible with continuous trem. You can play continuous trem with a lot of inflection, right? But there's certain kinds of melodies that you can't really write as effectively as in that kind of trem idiom, and so it's just awesome to hear that kind of spacious Gothic cathedral riffing over a blast.